Well, RJ, we just wrapped up talking to Tim Lawson of the Bettor Life. What'd you think?
Yeah, it was awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation with Tim, as always. Anybody that seems to be more into gambling and intertwining that in life more than us is a friend of mine, I'd say.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Just the fact that he's done this for so long and to be able to pick his brain on the podcasting process was beneficial for us personally and hopefully entertaining for the audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was fun talking through him, podcasting, all of that, where he's been, where he's going in his whole podcasting career, and then also talking about sports gambling markets at the end. That was fun. Casino gambling, we talked about that a lot too.
I was glad to get confirmation on that Trinity Rodman bet because when I saw he was a huge Washington Spirits homer, I was like, uh-oh, what did we just bet?
Well, it sounds like we got some big time CLV, so.
Yeah, he was a great listen. He's a great follow for anyone interested. You can find him at The Bettor Life on Twitter, and his podcast is also called The Bettor Life. You can find it on any podcast platforms.
Cool. Enjoy the show. Oh, shoot, real quick. Shout outs. So we got to give Adam and Pekin a shout out. And Walt in Wyoming. Walt in Wyoming, big shout out to you, bud. Thanks everybody for hitting up the store. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Adam and Walt. And for those who haven't had a chance yet, you can check us out, goodjujubets.net.
Yeah, there we go. Like and subscribe. Thanks so much.
Have a great day.
We can't lose. No, we can't lose.
Enjoy it while it lasts. Gambling gods, fickle bunch. Oh yeah, so easily
We
affected.
have a shooter and a good one coming out for a new point. Get your bets down, ladies and gentlemen. He's a rolling point is 9, place 9, 9 a winner. Got a hot hand. Place your bets, ladies and gentlemen.
They bet on absolutely anything. Don't make them prove it.
3-4 bad shooters, you could be out of money.
You're tuned in to Gambling with Good Juju.
Welcome in, everybody, to Gambling with Good JuJu. I'm your host, Peter. With me, as always, today is Ryan and Kurt. And joining us, we have a special guest, Tim Lawson, podcasting savant and general good guy. Tim currently hosts a podcast, The Bettor Life, with over 200 episodes, interviewing folks within the sports and casino gambling community, both casual and professional. Tim has agreed to join us to discuss the path in the world of podcasting, as well as share his opinions to help make us, quite literally, better gamblers. Now, Tim, there's a lot about your personal story out there, and for folks interested, you're quite candid about your life throughout your various podcasts over the years. You cover everything from serious topics about the military, government, mental health, including the excellent One Too Many project, which I've had the opportunity now to look into, and wow, that's incredible, to other related avenues such as humor, education, and sports-related content. Did I get that pretty well summed up for you, Tim?
There was a time of my life where I was a serial podcaster, where I had the time and space and the initiative to be like, hey, that would make a good podcast. Let me try that. And of all the ones you just named, I mean, I can name a dozen more that I got 3 episodes into, and I was like, never mind, there's nothing here. And so, yeah, back, pre-wife, pre-kid, I was in college, I was an adult. I was an older person going to college. I went to college in my late 20s. And so I spent all of my off time pursuing digital content, primarily podcasting. And it's landed me where I am today, both professionally and as a podcaster. So it was and I only got the Bettor Life now, but there was a time in my life where I had 3, possibly 4 active podcasts at one time.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm aware just from looking you up, and when you Google you, every time anything pops up, it's like, Tim, host of this, and this. And so, I'm writing down all the names, and I've got a list here of all of them. I'm not even sure how much I have here. We won't get into all of them. Can you share a bit about what the light bulb was that went off that got you into the world of podcasting, and just kind of what sparked all this?
Yeah, man. In 2011, I was just a mere few months out of the United States Marine Corps. I was attending I was attending Penn State's World Campus. I was living in Sacramento, and I was going to college online. And I had a friend who was like, "Hey, have you heard of these podcasts? Have you ever thought about doing a podcast?" And I think at the time, I think the only podcasts I was even really aware of were I think Gil's show, Beating the Book by Gil Alexander, Fantasy Focus with Nate Ravitz and Matthew Berry. and then a couple like others. But like podcasting was still in a stage where like there was no software to help you podcast. There was no one knew how to do it, right? You had to kind of figure it out on your own. My first microphone was a auxiliary stick mic, right? Not even USB. Like it went into that 3.5 millimeter, hook up on your computer. And I started a podcast with my buddy called A Couple Good Ideas, and it was a relationship podcast. Don't ask me why I thought that was a topic we should talk about, but that's the one that we did. Thankfully, you cannot find episodes of that podcast on the internet anymore, because I'm pretty sure my takes on relationships were probably a little trash. But that was the first one, and I had the luxury really to fail, because no one knew what podcasting was, right? There was no, okay, this guy's no good, right? So because it was a novelty to have a podcast, no one knew what to expect out of a podcast, right? So a lot of people thought it was recorded, like pre-recorded radio shows, or what, you just talk and you publish it. People didn't know. So our mediocre, barely edited podcast on the 3.5 mic jack, people, our couple hundred listeners listened because it was kind of novel to have this. No one criticized it because it was interesting that they knew someone who was doing this. And then a buddy of mine, him and another Marine that he was friends with, started a company called Veteran Empire, and it was a lifestyle clothing brand for veterans. And I saw the opportunity. I was like, oh, that should have a podcast. I was now the serial podcaster on me starting to see the potential in podcasting, and I was like, and I told him, I was like, hey, I will make content for you if you let me use your brand. That's it. That was the deal, right? I will make the content. I will promote Veteran Empire. I'm all about I'll buy into the culture. You just got to let me call it the Veteran Empire podcast and let me post like under the name and on the website and stuff. And because podcasts were still so novel, no one said no. Right? No, when you ask someone, hey, you want to be on my podcast? They're like, sure. I've never been on a podcast. Now you ask someone to be on a podcast, there's a good chance they've been on a handful of them. Right?
Yeah.
If they're in any sort of space. Back then, like Tim Kennedy, the MMA fighter, right? Like I was like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? He's like, yeah, sure, I'll do. Like the veteran thing had like really helped, like veterans, like helping veterans, right? But it was still novel for there to be to be on a podcast. It was a new front of publicity that very few people said no or balked at the idea. And the Veteran Empire podcast I did for a few years. I did about 100 episodes. That's when it took off. I saw the potential in podcasting. I started thinking of all the different ways that podcast could deliver, from daily to weekly. This bi-weekly stuff I'm actually relatively new to, but you said me and my buddy did a humor podcast or a comedy podcast. Tim and Derek do what they want. We literally talked about whatever we wanted. And it was great because I was really figuring out what I think content could do through the podcasting form. It's a very forgiving medium because you pre-record, you can edit, and there's only one sort of experience. There's one sense that you have to, and it's just audio, right? You don't have to worry about visuals and all that sort of stuff. And it became my resume. And as I was graduating college at the ripe age of 31, I was just coming off of a really important run of the One Too Many Veteran Suicide Project, probably my life's most important work. And a buddy of mine who was leaving the Department of Veterans Affairs digital media team recommended me to his supervisor. She looked at my podcast, she watched my TED Talk, she looked at a couple of things that I did. I don't think she cared one bit about what I did when I was in college, and she was like, that's the kind of guy I want on my team. And
that's awesome.
And so I have podcasting to thank. I have my buddy Jason from 2011. I tell him this every time I see him in person. I was like, dude, I have the career I have now because you asked me if I wanted to start a podcast. Like I can that conversation had this huge domino effect to where I am now, both professionally in my day job and personally in being this like online presence and being comfortable with all this. It's huge.
That is fantastic in terms of an overview, in terms of motivation for the three of us, for those listening, in terms of getting out there and doing something. For those in the audience who don't know, part of the reason we started this podcast was from listening to Tim Lawson on the Bettor Life and some of his examples of there's not a whole lot of folks in the space doing this. And so when you're sitting there talking about your process and coming up and what you went through, I think that really resonates with us as well. So,
and look, of all the podcasts I just named, like I can tell you a handful that did poorly. I tried doing a podcast called The Capital Experience. It was going to be for a local realtor. It was going to be underneath her brand. It was going to be about local businesses. It was too early. It was too ahead of its time because local, like I try to get restaurant stuff on there, like a podcast, but no, we're not interested. You know, like they wouldn't commit. Now it would be no problem, but it's, and so it was almost a little too. 3 episodes in, I realized it wasn't going to catch. I had a daily podcast I tried doing called 345. I was daily fantasy. I was going to name 3 players for 5,000 or less on FanDuel to consider, like little things. And then I realized I'm not that good at this. Why am I doing it? Like, why would anybody listen to me? Like, I'm not that good at this, right? And so, like, that's just a couple examples of like I tried it, it didn't work, and I just moved on. Unfortunately, I don't think podcasters have that luxury anymore. Like, I really am grateful to have had the space, and I was getting into podcasting. I was right. I barely saw the wave coming, and I was the first surfer on it, right? And thankfully, so I got to fall off and get on the next wave a few times before other people started surfing. And now, if you start podcasting and people don't like what you do, your name is associated with bad podcasting, or not even just bad podcasting, but like, I've listened to the guy's show. It wasn't for me. And then it doesn't matter really what you do after that. Your name's now associated with disinterest in the content. And so, I think podcasters are more like, you have to be prepared, right? It's got to sound right. It's got to be delivered correctly. The conversations have to be good. And you have to get people interested in your first episode or two for them to subscribe and want to keep listening week to week. And I do not envy new podcasters. I'm glad that there are new podcasters. I'm glad people like you decided to join the space, because every category and topic has a niche that's not being covered well, right? Yeah. And even in the saturation of the business world is probably a little oversaturated, but everywhere else, like you could, there's a corner of every industry that people are interested in that's not being covered well. And I think that's what's cool about podcasting, is there's so many opportunities.
Yeah. And like you said about the software and the equipment and everything, like there's really an opportunity for everyone to start one now, which is like the super exciting part. So you have all these like niches and all of these people that can do it if they want. Like, so like you motivating us.
Some podunk third party, it was called G Chat Recorder.
Oh,
and you connected through Google Chat, not the robust Google Chat now. The early days of no one knows how to use Google Chat, and it was like some third-party software that connected to that. You were never confident if it was working right anytime you used it. But now, like, look, I mean, we're on Zoom. You just hit record.
Yeah,
that's it, right? Like,
definitely
StreamYard and all these different things you can record on. It's amazing.
We definitely didn't spend a half hour still trying to figure out how to set all this up. We're new. Trust us.
Sorry.
So, we're getting the hang of it.
Let's step back to the point where you're doing your initial podcast and you start expanding into multiple podcasting ventures at the same time. Just kind of knowing the work involved with one podcast, what made you decide to go the avenue of branching out with multiple platforms at the same time?
It has to be the most organized I've ever been in my life. I can barely pull off the Bettor Life right now, right? Like I'm new father. There's a whole my life's so different, perfectly expected, right? To not be able to hold on to a hobby as when you're a new parent and stuff. But when I was 28, 29 years old, I'm attending college as an older adult. And so college isn't as difficult to me as it might be for an 18, 19-year-old. Like I knew how to approach like my classes, and, like I wasn't there to get A's. I was there to get grades. You know what I mean? Like I was there to pass classes, and I knew how to, and so I was able to devote a lot of time to my passions, and my passion at the time was podcasting. Podcasting became networking, right? Like that was the beautiful part about podcasting. It's still the case now, but it was even more profound then because people remembered being on your podcast because they did so few of them. And so your name became a little more recognizable. Oh yeah, you did Veteran Empire, or you were, I remember doing one too many with you. That was huge. Now people are like, oh, I've been on the Bettor Life, right? This has happened. Oh, I've been on the Bettor Life, right? No, you haven't yet. Oh, no, I thought I had. Because there's so many shows and so many sports betting shows, right? Like, and we've talked and we've been like, and there's been, it's not as profound as it was, and so I was organized. I was determined. I had a calendar set up. I tried to batch recordings the best that I could, like multiple hours, just record. That gave me, a couple weeks of episodes for all 3 shows. One of them was with a buddy that I could fire up with, hit record. All right, what am I going to talk about today? Let's make dumb jokes about this, right? Like that was one show. I'd had one show about hip hop and music that didn't last. It was like 12 or 13 episodes. It didn't go very long. That took a little bit more time and effort because I had to listen to lyrics and come up with questions based off that. And then when One Too Many hit, that kind of consumed everything, right? Because veteran suicide was a hot topic in 2014, and I was still doing the other stuff, and I was doing them well. But it was like One Too Many has to be in a good place for me to be okay with doing anything else that I'm doing. I just was really fortunate of being the most organized that I've ever been in my life in scheduling recordings and finding times to edit and stuff like that. My wife, who I was dating at the time, of course, was supportive of the whole thing. So I had the time and space and to do it. And it was literally just what I did in life, right? Was pursue these projects. And so as soon as I got my first full-time job, when I started my career coming out of college, for better or for worse, I cut it all off, right? I hit up I called my sponsor for one of my podcasts. I was like, look, I know this is really sudden, but I'm making a career change and I'm gonna have to stop. It was called Fuel for Warriors, and I had a sponsor for that show, and it was tough because you have business situations, stuff like that, but I knew I now no longer have the time to do all of these projects. I need to focus on my career. And so it all kind of came to a screeching halt. I went from doing multiple projects to focusing on one. But yeah, that's it was a simpler time when you could just focus on podcasting all day.
During the course of this podcasting journey, if you will, are there any particular moments that stood out as special or impactful as a result?
That's a really good question. I met and interviewed Sue Bird, which I bring up as often as I can because I think she's a legend in her sport. It kind of reminded me how unique podcasting is, right? We have this platform, and so long as people want to get themselves out there, and she was willing to, I have other iterations like that, like Coach Krzyzewski. I had on a podcast that I did for VA called Born the Battle. Alejandro Villanueva, the Pittsburgh Steelers lineman, was on that podcast as well. I'm trying to think of a number of other Mr. Feeney was on that podcast. Yeah. So when I was at VA, I launched a podcast for them called Born the Battle, and it was focused primarily on veterans and telling their stories, and there was a lot of unique opportunities. And that was everything that I've said about the benefits of podcasting. Click it up one notch because now it's this official government organization, right. And people had no problem. They felt safe being a part of that, right. And so I got the names like Coach K and Mr. Feeney and stuff like that, right? From those moments where I was like, this is what I've worked towards, right? I've done all of this to get to this point where I can pull these. I mean, how many people think are asking for interviews from Coach K,
right.
And while he's actively coaching Duke, and here I am talking to him for 20 minutes, right? Like, it did not go unnoticed for me that I was like, this is he could be doing more important things with his time, and he's sitting here talking to me, and it's because of the position I've put myself in. The moments I can recall on are the times where I was spending every little second that I could improving my craft to make sure that the product went out and was responded to. As far as actual podcasting moments, I've interviewed cabinet level secretaries in the government and professional athletes and stuff like that. And all that was due to getting myself in that position.
That's awesome. If you could pinpoint what exactly prompted the Bettor Life then. After being settled in at in my career, and it didn't take long, maybe about a year after being settled in, the one part of me, the one part of who I am that has been true from early days of my life is my interest in gambling.
right? And in anybody who's listened to the podcast, it's taken, the Bettor Life has taken so many different turns and changes into format and how I'm doing it, how it's being delivered. It might drive some people nuts that it's like inconsistent, year after year is something new. But I think the thread that holds it all together is my general interest in gamblers, right? Like gamblers we're a whole new breed. Or a whole different breed, I should say. And I find gamblers fascinating. And, the Bettor Life launched in early 2018, pre-PASPA, right? So sports betting was not legal. And I still felt uncomfortable talking to my coworkers, my friends, other people. I felt uncomfortable admitting that I was a gambler because of the stigma that's there. Now, all my coworkers know that I gamble. In fact, I brought up the World Cup the other day, and someone's like, "Oh yeah, Tim likes to gamble." Like they already made the connection. Like I brought up sports, and then they brought up gambling. Right? They've already made that connection, and so the Bettor Life came out of this desire to want to be more involved, wanting to explore that part of me more, to embrace it a little bit more, and to get into to talk to gamblers and learn about their lives as gamblers. I mean, the Bettor Life, Bettor, isn't just a great pun. It's like the idea was it's a different life, and the idea really is rooted in this one moment. The Eagles and the Patriots, that Super Bowl, right? Philly, we all remember it. My biggest position on that game was the amount of times that Giselle was going to be shown on the broadcast. I had over 1.5, and I had it for one of my bigger bets at that time was my position. And of course, I'm the only gambler at the Super Bowl party, or at least I'm the only one who admitted to have action on it. And I'm sure the other people did too, just didn't want to admit it. But I told the crowd, like the group, what my position was. And every time I would leave to go do something, I'd come back and they'd update. They didn't show her. We've been watching. Like all of a sudden, everybody else is involved. And I realized I have just now influenced how this whole group is now watching this game. And before that, I was watching this game differently than everybody else, right? Yeah. And even now, just in the most recent Super Bowl, I go to my friend's house and I have a sheet full of all the props that I have, right? And I remember the kickoff happens and I'm like, damn it. And I cross it off and he's like, wait, you already lost money? How? Like, how did it even happen? I had no touchback. It was a touchback. He's like, you can bet on that?
Right.
And so the Bettor Life, was inspired out of realizing that gamblers through risk, through odds, through let's admit it, a little bit of self-loathing. I think we all have experienced that a little bit as gamblers, right? It's its own unique experience, and I wanted to talk to other gamblers about it. And the show has taken legs. It's seen different iterations in different ways, but the root of it, and that I keep on coming back to as often as I can, talking to someone about their life as a gambler from the first time they were exposed to gambling to who they are now, and learning about every, up and down, win, loss along the way, because all of that, I think, matters.
I've been listening to your podcast since RJ introduced me to it, and I'm still not sure. Are you more of a sports gambling guy or more of a casino guy? Or is it yes? Is the answer yes?
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
I would say now that I'm a new father and I can bet on sports on my phone and I can't go to the casino with my baby, I would say that I am more so a sports bettor. But my interests, I have a foot in both camps for sure. It has been the blessing and the curse of the Bettor Life. There is a definite ceiling on my growth because I am too much sports betting for the people who are not into sports betting, and I'm not enough sports betting for people who are into sports betting, if that makes sense, right? Like, you have to be interested in both, in my opinion, from what I've learned, to want to listen week to week. That's the feedback that I got, years ago. I don't know if that's still the case, but yeah, you guys keep on looking at each other. I feel like there's something to be said here.
We battle the same thing. So
yeah.
We talk both sports and we talk gambling, casino gambling, and we go back and forth about how much should we be allocating to one versus the other. So while you're talking through all this, I'm looking at RJ going, yep, this is our exact conversation that we find ourselves constantly in.
Yeah. And I think, like when I kind of first stumbled upon you, that's what really drew me in, was because like we were so deep for years into the sports betting situation, but like I kind of was like ready to dabble back into the casino gambling. And we've gotten pretty into that since over the past year or so. So yeah, it was you like bridging that connection like through the casual conversation was what actually drew me in. So I appreciate it.
It makes logical sense. I mean, if you're into one, there's a good chance you're into the other.
And I'm glad to hear you guys say that, because it drove me nuts for years, right? Because I want to talk about both, right? I don't want to divide. There was even a moment where I thought, you know what? I'm gonna split the feed and have a casino feed and a sports betting. And then I was like, stop. I was like, that dumb idea, right? Like there's no, I should just do what I want to do. And I reread a really great essay called 1,000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly. And if anybody creates content or has a product or any sort of is trying to be a leader in any way, it's a really great essay. And it's sort of about how, you really only need about 1,000 true fans to really grow something. And at a couple of times where I've been frustrated that I've hit a ceiling on listeners, or I'm not growing as quickly as I want to, or, maybe there's a couple guests that people don't really know and only like the real listeners, the real fans listen. I can tell like the sort of once in a while fans don't listen. I get frustrated, and then I remember, it's those true fans. They're the ones I'm delivering to, right? They're the ones I need and they're still listening. And I can name probably 20, 30, 40 people that I know have been listening since the first few dozen episodes were put out, that I know still listen to every episode that gets put out now. And I need to remember that those are the people that I'm making content for, right? I want to grow the podcast. I want new followers and listeners like anybody else who makes content, but I can't do a disservice to the people who've been around for 5 years that have been listening to my content, good and bad, because they know that the average is something that they're going to be interested in. And that average has been a blend of both casino and sports betting. So I stay there.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I certainly struggled with that in my previous hobby brand, like going from like underground dance music to like having a radio show. And it was like, I was kind of stubborn about growing, but at what expense? The one thing I try to dabble in a little bit, but really keep limited, is poker, because it's its own silo. And so admittedly, poker hasn't blended in a whole bunch, but I've done the past couple episodes about the WSOP, but they've been from people who the community is familiar with, right? Sure. So it's a familiar voice talking about it, which I think helps. But what's really interesting, and I don't know if you've experienced this, and if you haven't, I'm sure you will soon. Casino players want to hear about people having fun gambling. Yeah. Sports bettors want to hear about smart sports betting. Right. And those things cannot flip-flop, right? Sports bettors do not want to hear about uninformed degenerates, right? And casino players don't want to hear about APs who never take a gamble. Right. Right. And it's really interesting, right? When if I have someone who ever card counted or is an AP, if they never admit to wanting to throw dice or scratch that itch, I get negative feedback of like, oh, it was nice, it was cool to hear from them, but like, I don't know, like I want to hear from someone who's like one of us, right? Someone who like wants to sit down at the baccarat table for 5 hours, right? And then but on the other side, if there's a sports bettor on and they say one thing that's not quite the right information, that's discounted too as bad, right? And so it's recreational but smart casino gaming, and then smarter and sharper sports betting, and those things cannot flip-flop.
We're in trouble. We love to give uninformed entertainment takes in the world of sports gambling.
You know how sports bettors are, right? Everybody knows better than the other person. Every person is more informed or is the sharpest sports bettor that's entered the space. No one's willing to admit that they're just like not that great. Even Jason Weingarten, one of the smartest sports bettors that I've ever had the privilege of knowing, has admitted on his own stuff, yeah, I've been betting the NBA, I'm not any good at it. And if someone like him could admit that, yeah, he bets things even though he knows he may not have an edge, it's okay for you to admit that you don't know everything, you know.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation, though.
Right. Kind of reminds me of that recent Crab Vegas episode where they had the guy on and he's like, I only do the pass line with odds, and it was like super boring.
Hold on. So you interviewed on the Bettor Life, and then the Crab Vegas guys. I don't want to mess up his name. Can you remind us of his name, Tim?
Jack Mulaney is his name. He's at Turbulence 2 on Twitter. He's a gambler's gambler in my opinion, and he is someone who knows and understands the odds he wants to make sure people know, right? Like you can play how you want to play, but you have to speak correctly about the plays, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, shout out to him on 2 points. One, I listened to him twice in the same week, this guy who I didn't know before in my entire life, and I was highly entertained by both interviews, talking somewhat about the same thing. And number two, as good of a job as you did on that interview, boy, he took care of Crap Vegas on that interview. That was awesome. And I like those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to. Jack is going to come prepared, and he's not going to need as much time to prepare. You know what I mean? Like he's going to know his when I learned that Jack was at WSOP, I was like, hey, will you come talk about the Bettor Life? And he's like, sure. And that same day, I heard the Crap Vegas episode. We're like, yeah, we're gonna have Jack on next week, and I was like, oh, that's great. I guess we're both gonna have.
It was good.
It was just coincidence. Yeah.
It was great. So now, having hosted over 200 episodes of the Bettor Life, what is it about this podcast that you think has made it endure for you?
My wife, who has seen me try, fail, try, succeed, try, over succeed, whatever you want to call it, like shoot the moon, right, on this stuff. When I started the Bettor Life, she said this might be the best podcast you'll do, like success wise. Right?
Wow.
Of course, she saw one too many and knew the impact and the importance that it had. But when she saw how I was approaching the Bettor Life and how authentic I was being with it, she's like, this might be your most successful podcast yet. Which, at the time when she said it, I was my wife, who's not a gambler, who tolerates this side of me, like it was grandfathered into the marriage. My motorcycle and my gambling habit were grandfathered into the marriage, and for her to say that, I hadn't even thought about it that way until she had said it. And it started in 2018. By late 2019, I'm becoming well versed in things that I wasn't even well versed in. Like I can talk to you more about what happens in the casino now than I ever could 5 years ago when I started the podcast, right? And I'm always learning. I still find gamblers fascinating, right? I still want to talk to them about their experiences. I think the casino industry is a fascinating one. There's always stuff to learn there. And to be completely honest, like podcasting is a part of who I am. And, I love making content. I love making videos, and I like writing. I like to do website design. I like dabbling in all these different parts of it. But I'm a podcaster at heart, right? I've been doing it for more than 10 years. And as the kid was coming, I had faced the reality that maybe the Bettor Life was going to come to an end as well, right? Like I didn't think I was going to be able to juggle both. I was approaching episode 200, and I was like, you know what? Episode 200, this is the most episodes I've ever put out for a podcast, longest lasting. I can hang up the microphone and just enjoy family life. And I told my wife that, and she's like, yeah, until you start another podcast. Because my wife has seen me start podcasts, and she knew, and I was like, that's a good point. And so, blessing in disguise, I was too busy to get to episode 200 before the kid came. And so I was like, well, I committed to episode 200, so I'm at least going to do that many. And by the time I'd gotten to episode 200, podcasting had sort of found its way into my life, with the kid around, that it made sense for me and my family. And so I was like, I know I'm going to keep doing this medium because it's the medium I enjoy. Betting and gambling has been a part of me for 30 years, and I still am not done learning or talking about in these topics. And like as a sports bettor, I wish I could go back 20 years and tell that kid who's about to start sports betting half of what I know now, right?
Right.
And so the Bettor Life as a brand continues to slowly grow. The Bettor Life as a podcast still has legs because gamblers just want to keep hearing these conversations, and I want to keep having them.
So as far as the Bettor Life moving forward, then we were able to officially announce, it sounds like, that you are not retiring. Are there any other plans or thoughts moving forward for the podcast?
I'd really like to dabble in video more. Not, I know videoing the podcast is a thing that a lot of people do right now. I don't know if that's something I like the podcast being an audible medium and letting people listen. There's something kind of, if I'm being completely honest, there's something kind of what do you call it when you have a close relationship with someone intimate, right? There's an intimate relationship there when you're just talking to someone's earbud. I mean, I don't know if you guys have experienced this yet as young podcasters. Like, people recognize my voice, right? Like, I've been in casinos and people are like, "Oh, do you do the Bettor Life?" Right? Like, it's like, oh my goodness. I've gone to meetups and people are like, "Oh, how did this turn out?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "Oh, you mentioned it." I was like, "Oh, I brought that up on the podcast," right? Like, and like, it's an intimate experience to talk to directly into someone's ears and tell them about your life. And I will continue to do this as an audible medium, but I love storytelling, and I like doing it through the medium of video. And so that the Bettor Life as a brand is going to try to embrace video for storytelling, but for routine content, the podcast is where it's going to stay, so long as I can find a nice pace that works for me and my family and keeps the content fresh and interesting.
Perfect. That's great to hear. We've talked a little bit about video content as well. It's a little bit of a struggle, especially just trying to get our feet wet in the avenue we're in, adding that additional layer of complexity to it. Certainly some work there. So he's looking at me. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for giving us the background and a little bit more insight as to how you got to where you are today with the podcast. If you don't mind, I have a few rapid fire questions just to break the ice a little bit further, and then we're going to talk a little bit about sports and casinos.
Yes.
First of all, favorite casino game?
Oh man, I juggle this. It's got to be Baccarat, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's got to be Baccarat. Craps is a really close second, but right at this very moment, if you're like, hey, go hit the casino. If I could get anywhere, it'd be at the Asian gaming room at the Hard Rock AC and at a Baccarat table there. Baccarat tables are usually like in cool areas. I like the pace of the game, and it's still newish to me, so it's exciting. So yeah, probably Baccarat.
Well, since we last talked, I've been doing a lot of simulations and trying to understand the game a little bit. There's a lot of rules and a lot of nuance, but I think I'm almost ready to hit a real table. So hopefully when we go to Vegas, we'll be doing that.
So my buddy Zach White, he's at Gamble Balls on Twitter. People may have seen him on there. We introduced him to Baccarat when we were down in Biloxi, and he texted me like a month later. He's like, damn, you'd be so proud of me. I went to a Baccarat table for the first time, and it's a game that people are like, that looks boring as hell, and you play it, but you have to play a squeeze game, which is a game where you can actually touch the cards, and that usually comes at a little higher minimum, but like your loss rate per hour is still less at a table like a Baccarat game than it's going to be at a blackjack or craps table.
Yeah.
So you got to play a squeeze game where you can touch the cards. That's where like the interest comes, the fun comes in.
I'm in.
What was the last concert you saw, Tim?
Last concert? That's a great question. Let me kind of go back. Man, maybe either Brad Paisley or Macklemore and Kesha.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah, so it had to be pre-pandemic. I don't think I've seen a concert since the pandemic. Cool. And I was able to get free tickets often to a venue out here in Virginia. The last couple of concerts I remember seeing were Brad Paisley, and then there was a Macklemore Kesha concert. That was a really good concert.
That's awesome.
I don't think I've been to a concert since the pandemic, which is wild.
Yeah, you have to get a babysitter and go see one someday.
So the one I regret not seeing is Cypress Hill.
Oh, baby.
Came to a local casino in West Virginia.
Oh.
And I was like, let me see a concert in West Virginia that features Cypress Hill. it was too close. Like it was, we were a month out from the baby due date, and I felt bad taking an overnight trip to so I didn't end up going. But that's the closest I've come to a concert since. But I've actually found myself searching concerts recently. You said rapid fire, and I'm going on these tangents. I am due for a concert, is what I'm saying.
What about the last sporting event you went to?
Oh, easy. I went to a Nats game last week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
This is my favorite one. 10 million cash or one blackjack hand for $1 billion.
10 million cash or one blackjack hand for $1 billion?
Yeah.
What are the rules at the blackjack table?
Oh my gosh. You got a real gambler, because we asked this a couple of people, and the real gamblers, they got to ask questions about, what if I want to double down or etc.
So the reason I ask,
he wants to surrender.
I want to surrender. That's exactly right. If surrender's available, you got to play the blackjack.
Yeah. Oh,
you're coming out away with at least $500 million.
Me and Kurt were talking about surrendering earlier tonight. Actually,
I knew that's where he was going with that.
Kurt, you ripping
surrender
it.
is my favorite rule at the blackjack table. If surrender's not available, I mean, give me the $100 million. I'm not gambling. I mean, that's life changing money.
Yeah.
It's okay if I start with $100 million. I have had a 19 and seen the dealer draw to 21 way too many times to take that gamble. I will take the $100 million.
Yeah,
but if surrender's available, I will take that. I will take the chance and then walk away with the $500 million.
Oh, that's a good answer.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So where'd you stay your first time you went out to Vegas?
Where did I stay my first time?
Yeah.
Strats. It was Stratosphere at the time. I went out there with my at-time girlfriend, and I knew nothing about booking hotels in Vegas. I probably booked it on Expedia, right? This shows how far I've come. And I paid full price or whatever full price with it. But yeah, Stratosphere. That's at the north end of the strip. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the all-time greatest basketball player is?
This is you're trying to get people to say either Kobe or LeBron or Michael Jordan, so you can tell them. I'm on a Chicago-based podcast, so it's clearly Michael Jordan.
There you go.
Celtics fans.
Celtics fans.
The answer was Larry Bird.
It was Larry Bird. Oh, okay.
No.
I'm not gonna. I have a spot in my heart for Kobe Bryant, though.
Sure.
It's difficult for me to not just consider him the greatest, and for a number of reasons that don't include championships.
Yeah.
I remember going to look. There's an entire generation. You said rapid fire, and here I go again. But there's an entire generation that just that modeled after that guy. Even in the transition from Michael to LeBron, people wanted to play like Kobe Bryant did. And I remember going to a Wizards game in Washington D.C. and it's a transient city. Not a lot of people are from here, so the Wizards don't have a strong fan base. But when Kobe was here, there was more cheers when Kobe Bryant scored a basket than anything the Wizards ever did, right? And it just showed how he traveled well. People loved watching him play, and I think that he gets left out of the conversation too much in the whole Michael LeBron debate. Yeah.
All right, that was a fair opinion.
Yeah,
I'll give you credit for that.
dig it.
That's a good one. All right, Tim. We need to talk a little bit of sports now.
Let's do it.
Everyone here at this table is tailing you on this Trinity Rodman Golden Boot play.
Yes, we are.
So now I did my research, Tim. So now I have to ask the question: are we tailing you because it's a quality play or because you're a homer?
Oh, it's a quality play. I mean,
okay.
The proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, she opened 22-1 at a lot of spots. She moved down to 18-14 in one of those spots. FanDuel foolishly opened her 30-1, 31-1 after those spots had moved. They're down to 14-1. Everybody, I thought the entire world would be paying attention to this. She has the highest upside of any player on a team that's going to make a deep run. Is she going to have the most opportunities? I don't know, but the upside's there for sure.
So for those who may be unaware, Trinity Rodman plays for the Washington Spirits in the NWSL, and our good friend Tim hosted a podcast on the Washington Spirits in his past.
Yeah.
So where did the passion for them come from?
Women's soccer was growing in popularity, but the barrier to entry was nowhere, right? It was I was this little podcaster, and they're like, yeah, they gave me a media credential, come to the games, and so I chose women's soccer deliberately to cover as a sport to get sports journalism experience in, and with it came I grew in love with both the sport and the team at the same time. And now I do nothing in sports journalism, but I absolutely love women's soccer.
Are there any sports teams outside of them that you're passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, I will always root for the Spirit. They're my local team, and they always have a place in my heart. But like, I can watch any NWSL team, any game that's on, and enjoy it. I probably have action on it too, but I can. You know what I love about women's soccer? They don't flop. They don't dive. Right,
Yeah.
And the biggest criticism of soccer is just of the performative flopping and diving and the look. They go down like anybody else to try to draw a foul. It's smart play, right? Like every sport has it. You watch the best wide receivers in the NFL try to draw penalties, right? It's a part of the game. But like Neymar and his quadruple barrel roll every time he gets touched to try to draw a foul is ridiculous, right? But in the women's game, they know that they're going to get that criticism, and they do it. So they do it less, and it makes for a better watching experience, in my opinion.
So you do your own handicapping, correct, for soccer?
Yes.
Which leagues do you focus on?
The USL Championship, up until probably just a few months ago, was my league of choice, because for people who don't know, they are the second tier professional league in America, right? So there's Major League Soccer, which most people know, and then there's the USL Championship, which is below that. There's no affiliation. Just even like a year or two ago, you could get like an underdog that was like 8-1, 9-1, and they're a competitive team, right? And it's like the lines were so juicy.
Yeah.
But the lines have tightened up. It's a much harder, people say MLS is hard to beat, but I think USL is starting to get there too. American soccer leagues are still my preference, just because I pay more attention to them, and so like I'm more likely to catch little things in a lineup. NWSL, probably more so than any other league, has like excused absences, which is something that a lot of leagues don't see. Like a player just may not be available for one night because of an excused absence for family-related stuff or whatever it may be. They accommodate that stuff more often, and you have to know what that player means, right? If they're not going to be making that lineup, and just like with any sport, but because I pay more attention to these leagues, I feel like I can make those decisions more quickly. So MLS, NWSL, and USL are my three leagues of choice. And then in European soccer, I like French League One.
So neither RJ nor I do our own handicapping. Kurt does his own handicapping, but do you have any advice for those who are looking to get into their own handicapping? Because I feel like I should be, and I don't.
From my experience, professional gamblers will correct me on this, I'm sure, and the people who are smarter than I on Twitter will be fast to correct me. But from my point of view, there's two ways to approach. There's quantitative analysis and there's qualitative analysis, right? Now, the quants will tell you that qualitative analysis is just noise, right? That there's no signal. That signal is only in the numbers. Yeah, maybe. But I think that I can watch a soccer squad and know that that a key player is going to stop giving 100% around minute 70 if his team's down 2-0, right? And that means that they're probably not going to score. The likelihood of them scoring has now gone down because the striker's not putting as much effort into it. The team who's up 2-0 probably isn't putting too much effort into it because they just need to come away with the 2-0 victory. So now the live line on 3.5 goals or 3.25 goals are going to be, the under's live now because this player, whether he loses gas, loses interest, whatever it may be, and you're not going to see that necessarily in the numbers. But if you watch that, you watch that game enough, watch that team enough times, you're gonna be like, man, like they really slowed down, in the last 20 minutes of the game. Now, I think that you have to be like those instances are few and far between, right? You're not going to find that on every team that you watch or with every player. But I think there is something to be said about qualitatively, assessing players and teams. Also, find data. You hear a lot of people say bet on paper first and then with your money, right? Like if you want to try handicapping and modeling, you don't actually have to put money in it. To say like, okay, if I were looking at this data or looking at whatever approach I'm giving, I think that we'll use, sport going on right now, baseball. I think the Twins are a play today. And then you would just sort of, track that on paper, but not actually put money into it. And you can, sort of see, I personally think that as gamblers, I think you take it the most seriously when you have stake in the game. We all have made $5 bets while our $100 bets are going on, and we still are kind of sweating that $5 bet. You know what I mean? Like we still want that bet to win, and it of course it's a fraction of the other action we have going on, but it's money wagered and we care about it, right? And so I think that, you know, even at a small level, having some stake in the game is a good idea. It takes trial and error. It takes finding an angle. Derivative markets help a lot with that, right? There's a lot of different things that you can bet. Unfortunately, you know, derivative markets are going to get you limited quicker, so that's something to always keep in mind at regulated and legal books. But handicapping starts with finding good data that you trust, and, you know, trying to figure out what it means to the line and moving on from there. It also means, like, if you pay attention to the market enough, you know, there's some bets that I make simply because I know the line's going to move, because I know how the market reacts to certain teams, right? Especially with like soccer totals. I can get ahead of soccer totals every week. Like every week I have one or two bets where I kind of lean that way, but I make the bet simply because I know the line's going to move.
That makes perfect sense. Kurt, you were just talking about that last week, I think, on the episode. You get a sense whether you look at the pitcher strikeout props.
Yeah, any of the baseball. You make enough baseball bets when you make your own wagers that you know exactly where the players' lines are going to be and where they're going to move by closing line. So you get a big advantage by making your own plays because you get to see it move in action.
I had the under in the Seattle-Minnesota game, and it's like the fourth inning, and it flew over already. So,
well, that's TV3, top right corner. What about on the casino side of things? Do you have any advice for recreational gamblers? I need it more than anyone, Tim.
Sorry, I was just reviewing my bet that's losing. Could you ask that question?
No. On the casino side of things, do you have any advice for recreational gamblers or folks? I've been getting stomped, Tim. Any advice for me?
Yes. So it's, you know, I just had a conversation with one of my friends, one of my really close gambling friends, a couple hours ago, about something similar to this. We were talking about there's two schools of thought in casino gaming. You have one side that thinks like you need to always know the house edge and you need to always play the small house edge, right? And then the other side is like, well, just play how you want to play. It's all negative EV. It's all, you know, unless you have an edge, then it shouldn't matter. Just play how you want to play and have fun. Well, yes, but if you had three roulette tables in front of you and they were all the same minimum, and one was 0-0, one was 0-0, and one's 0-0, you should play the 0-0, right? Because the house edge is inherently lower. Now, in order to see that house edge actually impact your bankroll, you would have to play countless games, right, for it to come to that. But the point, you know, every time you can lose less, you should take advantage of that, right? And so knowing, like I said, I mentioned surrender earlier. I always ask if surrender's available because I know it's going to improve my game 0.25%. And for a lot of people, that may not mean that isn't a whole lot. But when you hit the casino as often as at least I used to, it matters, right? And it's good to know that you have that with you. So understand the games, understand the house edge, understand, you know, what options you have as a player. Like, you know, a game like baccarat, like you or not baccarat, blackjack. You have decisions that you need to make, right? And you need to know how those decisions impact the house edge. People who are new to gambling, they think, oh, the house always wins. Well, the house doesn't always win because it's like some trick, right? It's not some like button they push and a hole opens up and your seat tips over and you fall down because, you know, into some chutes because the house always wins. That's a good visual, right? And the house always wins because the casino's one big math problem, right? And they win because the probability in which an event is happening, they are paying you less than what that probability suggests, right? So for like a coin flip, you know, you're flipping a 50-50, but they're only paying you 95 cents on the dollar, right? And that's where and so, yeah, you would have to play millions of hands to see the exact house edge be represented in your bankroll. But that also doesn't mean that you should just be throwing out money to the you know, any 7 on the craps table, which is like a 16% house edge,
right, and
expect to survive, you know, on any given session. So know the house edge, know the rules, and a lot of people under bankroll themselves for the game that they're playing, right? A lot of people, especially, and this is especially true when they go up in minimums, right? A lot of players will go from who are used to playing $10 craps table, they'll go to a casino and only $15 craps tables will be open, and they'll buy in for the same amount. Well, I mean, it just went up 50%, right? Like the buy-in, like I know it seems like only $5, but that's 50% more money you have to put on the pass line. That's more money than you're putting in odds. If you're doing double, triple, 5 times odds, if you're placing that place bet, that's more money that's being put out there. You need to put more money on the table to have the same experience, and most people don't account for that. So, there's different philosophies on how much money you should have for different games, but realizing how much money you have to commit to have a long session that's going to see typical variance, right? If you go up to a $15 craps table with your $10 craps table bankroll, 3-4 bad shooters, you could be out of money, right? And that's not fun for anybody.
Every time.
This is where the real craps players are going to hate me for saying, this is, consider playing the don't.
We love playing the don't.
We love the Vader.
The don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tim, I got a couple things on that. So to take your advice for him, one of the things that I found out is that I'm a numbers guy too. So like I play craps every week, and the thing I analyze, it's all a numbers game, right? And you want to have the least house advantage on every bet that you make. So I find myself sometimes where I get paralysis by analysis, right? If I'm making a squeeze play and 2 hits and I'm pulling down, all right, or 2 hits and I'm off, right, and I'm collecting money, I often make the mistake where I'm too conservative and I miss out on the big rolls, right? Because I know the 7's coming. What's your advice for somebody who's kind of like stuck in between that? Should I go aggressive or should I play to the math that I know? Because that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So it's a great question because every craps player deals or struggles with this balance, right? And I have some friends, like Dr. Mike, who's a co-host on You Can Bet on That. He's aggressive every time he steps out to the craps table. He does not waver from that, right? And then I have other friends that they play pass line with odds, and then that's it, right? There could be a half-hour long roll that didn't touch the 0.5 and it has not touched 5 cents, and then that's all they've had this whole entire roll. Everybody's cleaning up on money and they're perfectly satisfied with having their pass line bet with odds, right? Where do you meet in the middle and capitalize on good rolls without suffering poor rolls, right? That's the big question. I like to play a pass line with odds with a couple come bets. It's typically how I like to play. I will then collect those come bets a couple times before I really get into the roll, because it's really easy as the roll's going on to add to your bankroll thinking, oh, I'm like, this is going hot. Let me capitalize on this. And before you know it, that 7 comes and you got half your bankroll out there because things were going good and you were just reinvesting those winnings, right? You got to collect, right? And if you want to sustain yourself as a craps player, you have to collect. Once you kind of get some of that, once the roll has kind of paid for itself, if you will, now start reinvesting that money that starts coming in, right? Now it's still it sucks when that 7 comes and you bought it for $500 and $300 is on the table. That sucks, right? But if you bought it for $500 and you collected 50 or 60 off of the first 15 minutes of play off of place bets or whatever it may be, you're being conservative, kind of collecting. When that 7 comes, hey, that you probably broke even or even got a little bit, right? If that 7 doesn't come, all right, now I've gotten a little money for the roll. Now when money starts coming in, I'm gonna start pressing and reinvesting it, right? And if that 7 comes and I see a bunch of money on the table, whatever, I'm probably still at least break even or net positive on the roll, even if it wasn't this monster roll that I was hoping it was to be. I'm not stuck because I decided to be too aggressive too early. That's my approach to it.
So when you approach the craps table, do you have an exit strategy already in mind?
Craps for me has now become such a social game. Like, I'm never playing craps unless I'm with, I'm at a meetup or I'm with friends or there's a group dynamic in play. Years ago, I used to go to the casino and play craps by myself. Unfortunately, this is not what I do. I don't have the time to go have solo crap sessions anymore. So I currently have the kind of the luxury. Sometimes it's kind of when I'm ready to go and people are still playing. That's kind of awkward, right?
Yeah.
But I'm usually at the table until other people are ready to go do something else, or until something prompts us, like dinner or the next event or whatever it may be. My exit strategy is usually I'm looking for the first opportunity. My exit strategy, honestly, if there's been a hot roll, I'm ready to go do something else. I've won, right? Like if last year we were in Vegas and we went to Golden Gate. It was me, Mark Duvall from You Can Bet on That, and a couple other people. We got there. First guy points 7 out. Second roller, she rolled for a good 45 minutes.
Oh, baby.
We all won our money, and we're like, let's go do something else, right? Like, let's cash in. Because psychologically, it's really good to come out a winner, right? It's really good to practice leaving after you've won, because it's really easy to think, oh, we're on a hot roll. No, the hot roll's ended.
Right.
The heat is gone. Then you have no idea what the next shooter is going to do. Let's just cash in. Let's go. Let's change venues. Let's change games. You know what it be. I would say my first exit point is usually after that hot roll. And if there's no hot roll, it's if I very rarely rebuy. If I'm out of money, I'm just done. I'm gonna go find something else to do too.
And that's the situation that I always find myself in is I'll get up a little, I'll get down a little, and then it'll just dwindle away on me because I never properly know when should I stop, take a break, and then create a new session, if you will.
Those sessions are the most difficult, right? When it's that slow grind down, because you're just waiting, right? You're waiting for that roll to come to bump you back up, you know, and you start wondering, like, should I be more aggressive so that way, like, you know, I can profit more off of what does happen? Should I be more conservative and possibly miss those opportunities? That is difficult. There's no right answer to that, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we've gotten so deep into the craps. You know, the first little bit is like, okay, what do all these bets mean? And like, what are the odds and what do they pay? And what do I have to put down to bet on them? And then it's like, okay, now it's like, all right, there's 65 different strategies that like have been documented. Like, what are all of these and which ones are fun and which ones do I feel like are going to win? And then like you get through all that and it's like, okay, now I got the money in front of me. And that's where it's like totally psychological. It has nothing to do with the odds. It has nothing to do with the strategy you're playing. It's just a matter of like managing your emotions with your bankroll and like getting the hell out of there.
I will say one thing that's good to get in the habit of, for me, I should say, a habit that I got into while I was playing solo that was really good psychologically. If I was down under half of my buy-in, if there was a roll that was good enough to get me within one pass line of my buy-in on either side, like, you know, if it was a $15 table and I bought it for $500, if I was somewhere between that 480, 520 range after a roll, let's walk away, right? I'm lucky to have gotten back to this point. Let's now look, I don't play aggressive enough for that to happen soon. So that usually means if I've gone down to below 50% of my bankroll, I've probably been there for a good hour, right? So like I've gotten my fix. And look, it's not easy, right? Because you want to keep playing. You're refreshed back at bankroll, right? Like, hey, all right, let's get back on this horse. But it's good to it's easy to forget what else the casino has to offer when you're in the middle of a game.
Right.
And so when you can get to a point where when you have signals of like, okay, now's a good time for me to leave, even if it means taking a walk around the casino, using the restroom, making a sports bet, whatever it may be, and coming right back and playing. The dealers might give you a hard time for coming right back to the game 20 minutes later, but it's good psychologically to step away from the game. You may walk around and be like, oh, hey, that pie gow table we were looking at earlier is open. Let's go play that, you know? And then now you're at a game that has a slower loss rate, and the reason you're able to get on it is because you had the discipline to get off the craps game.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Well, we're going out to Vegas here in about a month, and I've been having some recent struggles at our local casino, and so I'm trying to get myself psyched back up for the gambling process. We're in Peoria, Illinois, so it's the Paradise Casino in East Peoria. It's Boyd's
property. Yeah.
The Boyd's property. Okay.
Yeah. And like you said, like we get there and we play craps because it's really the only fun thing to do there.
There's not a whole lot going on.
Free coffee.
Yeah, free coffee.
I love free coffee.
Thank you so much.
Overlapping in Vegas?
I think so.
Are we?
Yeah. So we're unfortunately not going for Bet Bash, but we're going like the weekend before. So I think what do you get there, like Sunday, Monday?
I get there the 6th. Yeah, it's Sunday.
Awesome. Well, we should definitely link up while we're out there.
Okay.
Because we'll be there on Sunday and then we come home on Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a Monday afternoon flight.
Monday afternoon flight. So yeah, whatever the situation may be, like I'd love to meet up and grab a beer, coffee, a game of dice. You can show me this. What is it? Squeeze play, baccarat.
Baccarat squeeze game. Let's see if we can find one downtown. Where are you guys staying?
We are staying at the Plaza downtown.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Biff's Gambling Hall.
Plaza. That's a joint right there. Yeah.
We love the feel of it downtown. That's always our preference.
Yeah.
So Plaza's a really unique place, right? That people either love it or they don't want anything to do with it. Plaza just had a bunch of new additions in this little remodel of theirs where they put a carousel bar outside of their front where all the light bulbs are and everything.
Right.
That picturesque. They put a little carousel bar out there. They got a donut spot that they just opened up. They added to their steakhouse. So they've done a bunch of remodeling. But what I love about Plaza is Jonathan Jossel, who is the CEO of Plaza. He listens, and he wants to run a good casino. And I remember in 2019, we were there for some event, and Plaza had this weird thing where you couldn't charge to your room until you'd gone to the front desk and requested it, and it had to be approved for you to be able to charge. It was this weird, archaic rule that they had. And we ran into Jonathan at an event, and we're like, Jonathan, why can't we charge to a room? He's like, what do you mean you can't charge to your room? And I was like, yeah, no, we try to charge to a room, and they'd say you can't do that until you go to the front desk and get your account opened up. And he got on the phone immediately right in front of us. And I remember him saying, why would we do that? That was his question on the phone. And hate or love Plaza, it's a place where everybody who works here just wants that place to be as good as it can be. And so I have a special place in my heart for Plaza.
That's awesome. I haven't spent a lot of time there, but I'm excited to.
Yeah, right across from Circa.
Right across.
Also convenient.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that was part of the consideration when we booked. Absolutely.
It's kind of a happening corner. Cool.
All right. Are you feeling comfortable, RJ?
This was great.
Yeah. Tim, are you feeling good?
I am feeling very good. I apologize if I've ranted too much on any of these topics, but I don't get to be on this side of the microphone very often, so I'm very excited.
Well, we're so glad to have you. You've been a wonderful guest. We really appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully we'll be able to pay you back when we get out to Vegas. And just once again, thank you so much for coming on with us.
You're welcome, guys. I'm looking forward to throwing dice with you guys out in Vegas.
Thank you. Yes.
That'd be awesome.
Excellent. For those wondering, you can find Tim at the Bettor Life on Twitter, on every podcast platform available. Thanks for joining us, Tim. You have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks, Tim.
All right.
See ya.